Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. South Korea's former President Yoon is set to receive his first criminal court verdict this afternoon over charges linked to his declaration of martial law in December 2024. The court has approved a live broadcast of the hearing at 2 p.m., citing strong public interest. The United States and Taiwan have signed a trade deal that lowers tariffs on Taiwanese goods to 15%. This involves a $250 billion investment by Taiwan semiconductor and tech companies in the U.S. The UN Security Council hosted an emergency meeting on Iran as massive protests continue to intensify across the country. Meanwhile, the United States issued sanctions on Iranian officials accused of leading the deadly crackdown, while President Donald Trump warned Tehran to stop the killings. We begin this morning with former President Yoon, who's set to receive his first court verdict this afternoon over charges tied to his brief declaration of martial law in December 2024. The Seoul Central District Court will hold Yoon's sentencing hearing at 2 p.m. on charges of obstructing public duty and other violations related to the failed martial law attempt. The court has approved a live broadcast of the hearing, citing strong public interest. Prosecutors say Yoon blocked investigators from detaining him in January 2025, violated the rights of 9 cabinet members by excluding them from a key meeting, and later drafted and destroyed a revised martial law proclamation after the decree was lifted. The ruling comes just days after a special counsel team sought the death penalty against Yoon on separate insurrection charges. Meanwhile, a day after returning from Japan, President Lee Jae-myung stressed the need to bridge divides and work together to safeguard South Korea's national interests. His comments come a day ahead of a lunch meeting with leaders from across the political spectrum. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
Having wrapped up back-to-back summits in China and Japan, President Lee Jae-myung stressed the growing importance of diplomacy during a weekly meeting with his top aides on Thursday.
국제 질서의 불확실성이 증폭될수록 영내의 평화와 안정이 기요합니다. 그렇기 때문에 상호 존중과 이해를 바탕으로 갈등 속에서도 균형점을 찾고 호혜적인 접점을 늘려가는 지혜로운 실용 외교가 어느 때보다 중요합니다.
President Lee cited rising instability in Latin America and the Middle East, apparently pointing to the political turmoil in Venezuela following recent U.S. military strikes and the capture of President Nicolas Maduro, as well as growing anti-government protests in Iran. He went on to stress that national unity, particularly in politics, is essential.
만일 우리 내부가 분열하고 반목한다면 외풍에 맞서 국익을 지킬 수가 없고 애써 거둔 외교 성과조차도 물거품이 될 것이 분명합니다.
Lee's remarks come as tensions continue to escalate between the ruling Democratic Party and the main opposition, People Power Party. On Thursday, the Nat'l Assembly opened a plenary session and placed a bill proposed by the DP to appoint a second special counsel to launch follow-up probes into former President Yoon, former First Lady Kim Gon-hee, and the death of a Marine during flood rescue operations in 2023. In response, the opposition bloc, including the PPP and the Reform Party, launched a filibuster. PPP leader Chang Dong-hyuk began a hunger strike on Thursday afternoon. The opposition is calling for a special counsel investigation into allegations of illegal lobbying by the Unification Church involving senior DP politicians, as well as claims of bribery cover-ups linked to candidate nominations during past local and general elections. Now, more spotlight will turn to President Lee's lunch meeting on Friday, where he has invited the leadership of 7 parliamentary parties, including the ruling Democratic Party and the main opposition, People Power Party. The PPP has previously indicated it will not attend. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
The United Nations Security Council has held an emergency meeting to address Iran's deadly crackdown on protesters. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has warned that the U.S. could intervene unless the killings stop. Our Kim Bo-young tells us more.
The UN Security Council convened an emergency session on Iran in New York on Thursday local time requested by the U.S. This comes after the human rights activist news agency reported that more than 2,500 people had been killed in Tehran's violent crackdown on protests. The U.S. ambassador to the UN said the U.S. stands by people of Iran and that President Trump is considering all options.
President Donald J. Trump and the United States of America stands by the brave people of Iran. Colleagues, let me be clear. President Trump is a man of action, not endless talk like we see at the United Nations. He has made it clear all options are on the table to stop the slaughter.
The White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt said on Thursday that Trump had warned Tehran to stop the killings.
What I will say with respect to Iran is that the president and his team have communicated to the Iranian regime that if the killing continues, there will be grave consequences.
While saying that 800 executions that were scheduled and supposed to take place were halted, Trump is closely monitoring the situation, added the spokeswoman. Meanwhile, the U.S. has imposed sanctions on key Iranian officials and military figures who led the deadly crackdown. The U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control on Thursday announced new sanctions. Included on the list was Ali Larijani, the Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, and several other officials who the Treasury Department said were the architects of Tehran's brutal response to the demonstrations. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
So the Iranian regime's deadly crackdown on protesters has left thousands dead across the country. Now, for an in-depth look at the situation, we're joined today by Dr. Lee Ji-soo, visiting researcher at the Institute of Middle East Studies. Dr. Lee, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get into the details, how would you assess the current situation in Iran? What key issues have sparked these massive protests across the country?
Large-scale anti-government protests are continuing across Iran, and they have effectively escalated into a nationwide uprising. It has been almost 3 weeks since the protests broke out, and they now appear to be easing somewhat. The demonstrations were initially triggered by the collapse of Iran's currency, the rial, which has fallen to more than 1.4 million to the US dollar. Protesters argue that the country's economic crisis is the direct result of government policies. They accuse the Iranian leadership of neglecting its own citizens while channeling resources to the external allies such as Hamas and Hezbollah, and of mismanaging foreign policy in ways that have prolonged international sanctions. The situation was further aggravated by the collapse of Ayan, the bank, last October. The bank was known to be very pro-government. It is accused of engaging in widespread financial misconduct under the state protection, which deepened public anger and financial instability. Inflation has surpassed 40%, driving up the cost of basic food items such as meat and rice. As daily life has become increasingly difficult, public frustration has boiled over into protest. Crucially, demonstrators say this is no longer just about criticizing policy failure. They are calling for fundamental change to the system itself.
Right, and thousands of protesters are reported to have been killed by Iran's security forces. And videos that are trickling out despite the internet blackout in Iran show just how serious the situation actually is, and it's now raising the alarm over the brutal crackdown. How has the Iranian government response, has it done anything to ease the protests?
The Iranian government is responding to the protest with an extremely heavy-handed crackdown. The IRGC and special police units have been deployed to forcibly suppress demonstrators, and security forces have fired live ammunition at crowds. According to Western human rights organizations, as you said, the death toll is estimated to be in the thousands, with some groups warning that the number could be significantly higher. Tehran has sought to justify the crackdown by claiming that the protests are being orchestrated by the U.S. and Israel. Because of the severity of the repression, the scale of demonstrations has declined in some cities, but public anger toward the government has only deepened due to the crackdown.
Right, the situation does seem pretty serious. And how might the situation in Iran affect the broader Middle East region?
There is growing concern that political instability in Iran could spill over into the wider Middle East. Gulf states such as Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Qatar are watching the situation with unease. They are worried that any attempt to destabilize the Iranian regime could disrupt global oil markets. The Strait of Hormuz, which lies between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula, is a strategic choke point through which roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes. Prolonged unrest in Iran could threaten security in the strait and raise the risk of broader energy disruptions. At the same time, Gulf governments seem to be concerned that the unrest in Iran could trigger political ripple effects at home. Actually, their relations with the current Iranian leadership are already strained, but they also recognize that if the regime were to collapse, it is entirely unclear what kind of government might emerge in its place. There is also deep anxiety that anti-regime protests in Iran could inspire similar movements among their own populations. As a result, Gulf states are closely monitoring the situation, mindful of both the regional security risks and the potential for domestic political contagion.
Right, and U.S. President Donald Trump has told Iranians that help is on the way, and European officials have reportedly said U.S. military intervention could come soon. How likely is this, and how might it change the situation if it does happen?
President Trump has warned that the United States will take very strong action if Iran executes detained protesters, but just about 2 days ago, he also suggested that the Iranian government is unlikely to carry out such executions. This indicates that an immediate U.S. intervention does not appear likely at this stage, so at the moment, what specific measures Washington may take against Tehran remains unclear. If military options were to be considered, they could include targeted strikes on regime-related facilities, but for now, no military tools seem more likely, such as cyber operations, the imposition of additional sanctions, and support for anti-regime groups. In fact, as the former report said, the U.S. Treasury Department has announced that it has already begun imposing sanctions on Iranian officials.
Right, and Dr. Lee, before I let you go, looking ahead, what do you think is going to happen next? Could the protests lead to a collapse of the Iranian regime, and what are the possible scenarios?
It seems that the Iranian regime is unlikely to collapse in the immediate term, in 1 or 2 days. The military and intelligence services remain loyal. There are no clear signs of elite defections, and although Iran is under severe strain, the state's financial status has not yet completely collapsed. But over the longer term, these protests pose a serious threat to the regime. This is not a movement driven by a single social group, but a nationwide expression of anger against the system as a whole. Authoritarian regimes rarely fall overnight. Usually they weaken and eventually collapse as repeated waves of unrest accumulate over time. Iran could follow a similar trajectory. So in the short term, the protests may appear to subside, but if public frustration continues to build, the regime's long-term survival cannot be taken for granted.
I see. I guess we'll have to see how that goes. All right, Dr. Lee, thank you so much for your time and insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
The United States and Taiwan have signed a sweeping trade and investment deal that lowers tariffs on Taiwanese goods to 15% and brings $250 billion in new Taiwanese investment into the U.S. semiconductor and technology industries. Now, the agreement is designed to strengthen American supply chains, create high-paying jobs, and anchor Taiwan as a key partner in Washington's economic and national security strategy. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
The United States and Taiwan have signed a major trade and investment agreement that reshapes economic ties between the two sides with a focus on tariffs, technology, and semiconductor supply chains. According to the U.S. Commerce Department, the deal was signed on Thursday by the American Institute in Taiwan and Taiwan's representative office in Washington. The agreement establishes what officials refer to as strategic economic partnership, designed to enhance U.S. domestic production, particularly in the semiconductor sector. Under the deal, Washington will reduce its country-specific tariff on Taiwanese goods to 15%. That matches the rate already applied to imports from South Korea and Japan and represents a cut from the previous 20% tariff on Taiwanese goods. In exchange, Taiwanese technology and semiconductor companies have committed to making at least $250 billion in new direct investments in the U.S. These investments will go toward building and expanding advanced semiconductor manufacturing, energy projects, and artificial intelligence production and research facilities. The agreement gives special treatment to Taiwanese semiconductor firms that invest in the U.S. During the construction period of new U.S. chip facilities, Taiwanese companies will be allowed to import up to 2.5 times their planned U.S. production capacity without paying sector-wide semiconductor tariffs. Once those facilities are completed, companies will still be allowed to import up to 1.5 times their new U.S. production capacity tariff-free. U.S. officials say the arrangement is designed to reward companies that shift production to American soil while strengthening supply chain security. The Commerce Department said the deal will boost U.S. economic resilience, create high-paying jobs, and enhance national security by reducing dependence on overseas chip manufacturing. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
At a time when K-beauty is garnering ever more attention, South Korea is also looking to boost the industry through further legislative support. Our An Sung-jin talked to both private and public sector stakeholders on this issue.
Once a mid-sized player, this K-beauty company now boasts a market value that rivals industry heavyweights. It's been about 10 years since this company took off, relatively young by industry standards. Yet today, its influence extends far beyond the domestic market, reaching consumers around the world.
These products are built on strong technological capabilities, and these R&D-driven technologies resonate with consumers. The already high share of overseas sales through its unique products gives the company a competitive edge too.
Profits from overseas markets now account for nearly 80% of total revenue, further pushing the company to expand its global reach. Firms like this are rapidly adapting their distribution networks while closely tracking consumer preferences and beauty trends in individual overseas markets, surpassing the strategies of traditional conglomerates.
You guys have so many brands, right? So it's a high competition, so it must be good, otherwise you can't survive in these industries. So I just really want to try because it's like very popular.
Because it's really very popular. I don't know, it makes my skin really look better. I mean, I'm trying like healthier maybe.
Cosmetics are South Korea's top export category among small and medium-sized enterprises, and the country currently ranks as the world's third largest cosmetics exporter. Powered by cutting-edge technology and price competitiveness, South Korea's cosmetics industry is expanding globally. In 2025, cosmetics exports topped $100 billion, setting a new record high. The Lee Jae-myung administration has also acknowledged the need to further foster and support the cosmetics industry as part of its national policy agenda. While most existing laws focus on regulatory oversight, this lawmaker proposed legislation to expand investment in R&D and exports across the Korean cosmetics sector.
K-beauty is already globally recognized, but the industry itself is largely made up of small and medium-sized companies. The bill is designed to support the entire cosmetics value chain, from research and development to manufacturing, production, distribution, and sales, covering every stage of the industry.
Through broader government initiatives like this legislation, officials expect stronger global competitiveness, increased exports, and a more innovative future for South Korea's cosmetics industry. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado has met President Donald Trump at the White House, calling the talks productive as Washington weighs its next moves over Venezuela's political future. Machado held a 2-hour closed-door meeting with Trump in Washington on Thursday, saying the discussion went well despite the administration previously sidelining her as a potential leader. During the meeting, Machado said she presented Trump with her Nobel Peace Prize medal as a symbolic gesture, though the White House did not confirm whether the president accepted it. The Nobel Institute has previously said the prize itself cannot be transferred. White House officials said the meeting did not change U.S. policy as Washington continues to focus on stability, oil oversight, and the possibility of new elections at a later stage. European nations have sent troops to Greenland amid tensions following U.S. President Donald Trump's repeated claims he wants to acquire the Arctic island for national security reasons. Military personnel from several European nations arrived in Greenland on Thursday to support Denmark following talks in Washington that revealed deep disagreement between the United States, Denmark, and Greenland over the island's future. Denmark and Greenland rejected U.S. takeover ambitions, saying Greenland is not for sale and does not want to become part of the United States. European officials said the deployments signal unity among NATO allies and aim to reinforce Arctic security amid rising strategic interest from global powers. The White House said on the same day that the measure would not affect U.S. decision-making nor the goal of acquiring Greenland. High-level diplomatic talks on the matter are expected to continue in the coming weeks. Now to Thailand, where 2 people were killed when a construction crane collapsed onto an elevated road near Bangkok on Thursday, just a day after dozens died when another crane fell on a train in the northeast of the country. The latest collapse in Samut Sakhon province during expressway construction crushed vehicles and has intensified public concern over repeated safety failures on major infrastructure projects. Prime Minister Anutin Chanvirakul ordered the immediate termination of contracts with a company involved in projects at both accident sites and said the government will blacklist contractors found responsible. Taiwan's top chip maker TSMC reported record profits as the artificial intelligence boom pushed investment to historic levels. TSMC said on Thursday that its quarterly profit jumped 35% from a year earlier, beating expectations and underscoring its dominance in advanced chip manufacturing. The company announced its plans to sharply increase capital spending this year, citing sustained demand from AI-related customers. TSMC also said it will speed up construction of new factories, including investment in the United States.
Most of the capital area was trapped in fine dust mixed with fog this morning, making conditions feel gloomy. I guess we're paying for warmer than seasonal average temperatures. Ultrafine dust level will remain bad in most parts of Korea throughout the day, with Chungcheongdo and Jeollabuk-do provinces issuing high dust emergency reduction measures. And it's not going to be as warm as yesterday, but will be hovering above the norms. Then wet weather next Monday will bring the coldest days of the season. I mean, it's about time. But again, this afternoon will be a mild one. Seoul gets up to 6 degrees Celsius. Gwangju, Busan both topping out at 15 degrees under sunny skies nationwide. But sunny skies will be blurred by that fine dust. Looking ahead, a fierce blast of freezing air is poised to take over much of Korea next week. Temperatures in the capital will drop to below minus 10 degrees Celsius. So please plan accordingly for next week.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.